All right, so I have a pretty fun build here today. It's going to be Vanguard versus Infernals, and it's going to be a Lancer Rush build. 2 base, it's quite strong against the current Infernal meta of going Conclave first into Fast Expand, and I just kind of want to show off the timings and such. Don't know if someone else has already done this, but this is basically the way to go against, if you're having trouble against 2 base Doombringer into an expansion, or if you're having trouble into 2 base Infernal play where they take a bunch of creeps and then they push you with 7, 8 gaunts and some brutes. This build will absolutely annihilate it and should punish Infernals pretty well for not having enough build diversity. So you can see over here at about the 1 minute mark, we're going to take our expansion, pulling 3 bobs as this is the most efficient using the bob overcharge, and then just taking our expansion right here. Our Infernal player is going for their fast expand, very, very normal. And let's go ahead and see what happens next. And that's actually going to be nothing because both of these builds are pretty passive early on. They're both decent economic builds. Yeah, he gets his Iron Vault. He gets a couple more gaunts. Doesn't push out with them because generally that's a bad idea. One Lancer can just kill all of them, and it's just way too risky for them to do that. So usually you don't see Infernal attacks until at least 3 or 4 minutes. And very fun thing about this build, all your structures are built at the same time with overcharge. So you can see here, I get 3 barracks, I get 2 habitats actually, and we're going to be pumping out Lancers out of these 3. It's very important that you actually wait till you have the resources to build all of this, or at least almost all of this, because you save as much mining time as possible. Ignore the idle worker over here, and that's going to let you maximize your resources. And at this point, you can see the Infernal player, he's starting to creep up. He's going for the goat camp. Pretty standard. Usually they don't push out any earlier because if you have 2 dogs, you can punish them. So he's going the standard, very safe Infernal build. But because this build for the Vanguard actually goes for pretty fast Lancers, you can actually punish them pretty hard for this. As you can see, he only has 3 Fiends. I'm going to have about 4 Lancers to fight this group. And that's going to be more than enough to deal with all these gaunts. Already softened up from the goats. And with a little bit of micro, you can just jump right on top of them with your Lancers. At this point, we have full Lancer production. We're continuously producing workers, and we're going up to 12 workers on each base. After that, we're cutting workers so I can throw down 2 more barracks, and we're going to get the biokinetics lab so that we can get Lancer speed. But Enticity, you might ask, what are we gonna do? We don't have enough Therium to actually get Lancer speed, and to that I say it's not going to be a problem, because generally what happens after the initial stage of the game, right? You take a fight against the Infernals, and your Lancers are going to be pretty injured. And obviously, this is a pretty bad situation if you're going up against Gaunts. But we can get 2 in 1 here, going for the Deer Camp. In this case, 5 minutes, but generally, you just take the Deer Camp when you can. Usually after you skirmish with the Infernals a bit, because it's going to give a pretty nice healing aura on all of your Lancers, basically resetting them to full. And on top of that, the 75 Therium is going to let you start researching Lancer speed. And at this point, you can see I already have my 2 extra barracks done. You build both of them with another bob overcharge. And by the way, great thing about the build, the timings are way easier to remember because you basically just make a set of buildings with each bob overcharge. So pretty good. You can see we have a nice solid handful of Lancers here. But this is what? A little over 12, maybe 14 Lancers and an Exo. We have an Exo because I did have an extra worker mining Therium. You can finagle around with it a little bit. And from here, you can see we do have the drop coming in from the Infernals. Now, some builds will hit with the drop a little bit earlier. This one's a little bit slower. He went for an expansion. But if you feel like the drop is going to come, if you rally in, 1 production cycle of Lancers and an Exo, you're going to be fine. And pushing into the Infernal base, you actually have a pretty massive army, because you've been staying on tier 1 the entire game, producing basically one of the cheapest units in the Vanguard army. And the Infernal player has basically nothing. One turret's not going to save him here. You can see in his base, he's teched up and spent a lot of resources on that. And his drop's actually going to have to come home to defend. And this is just a great situation, right? This dropship has basically achieved nothing this entire game. I see that it's come to the other side of the map, so I'm pulling in my army. And from here, it's basically game. Really nice way to punish overly greedy Infernal players. And a really nice way to not die to them if they're going for like an aggressive 2-base build. And from here, you're generally going to have a larger army than them. You can secure map control, you can pick off their expansion, maybe deny an expansion and start creeping, and basically play a normal game of Stormgate from here. So there you go. Hopefully you enjoyed. This is at Masters 3, so not like the highest level of play, but pretty good for most players, I think.